I am pleased to welcome our first speaker. Replica is a new, large, or big data firm that is starting to work with MPOs and planning agencies all around the country. And they were kind enough to sponsor our conference, but why we're bringing them here today is that they have been working with Caltrans and the Air Resources Board and actually the Sacramento Area Council of Governments in a joint contract where we've often talked about the state and our regional agencies sharing data. And this is an interesting model where we have our agencies working from the same data, and it's something that we're having a conversation about. And this month, they're offering a free month to our technical people to go in and kick the tires or look at the ones and zeros or whatever you do. And this morning, we have Nick Bowden, who's the CEO of Replica, and he's going to share a little bit about what they're doing and what the offer is, and talk a little bit about the free webinar that's available for our folks on Friday. Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Let me share my screen here. I'll give a brief kind of overview of what we do. Bill, can you confirm that you can see my screen on your side?
I can see your screen.
Perfect. Let me go into present mode here. So as Bill mentioned, I'll give a little bit of backdrop. We, as a company, have actually been around for about 4 years. So we started inside of Alphabet, or inside of the Google universe, about 4 years ago, and then spun out into a standalone company about 1.5 years ago. And Bill gave a little bit of an overview, but the way that we describe ourselves is a data platform for the built environment. So not just mobility, although that's a significant use case, but mobility, economic activity, land use, and things like public health. And the reason for that, and I'll talk a little bit about before the product, kind of the things that we believe in and why, is that COVID has been a great example of where a public health crisis has fundamentally shifted mobility patterns, which then impact economic activity and spending habits, which then change the value of land use, which then of course impact mobility again. And so a lot of the work we do is designed to help public agencies from cities and counties and MPOs or COGs up to the state level better understand kind of the relationship between all of the moving parts of a particular place. And oftentimes, I think it's helpful to describe like what's so hard about this today. A lot of folks on the call are certainly familiar with travel demand models or regional travel demand models or big data and analytics. And a little bit more broadly, there's a couple things that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So the first is what we call information asymmetry, but that is maybe put a little bit different. The public sector has a significant, call it information and tooling gap, typically against the private sector, meaning said another way, Uber knows way more about mobility patterns and origins and destinations and travel times than probably any city they operate within. And it's certainly not just Uber, right, that falls in that camp. It could be Uber, it could be Lyft, Airbnb when it comes to housing, and a variety of other things. And a lot of our work is really geared at how do we actually level the playing field and give public agencies like you all access to the same kind of tooling and information in a privacy sensitive way to help you all make better policy decisions or better land use decisions or whatever the case may be. I think the second bucket is feedback loops. So I think whether it's personal or professional, the frequency of our feedback loops probably drives better decision making over time. And the reality is with the built environment, feedback loops are just really, really infrequent. It takes years to go through a planning process, let's say to build new transit or build new roadways, and then go through all of the regulatory requirements and then go through the construction. And maybe a decade later, you actually find out if your core assumptions about the need for new infrastructure were right. But it turns out that in that decade, lots of things have changed. So you can imagine, for folks that did long range planning before COVID hit, a lot of those assumptions may no longer be accurate, right? And so really thinking about how to use data in an adaptive way and a high frequency way is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. And then finally, and Bill mentioned this a little bit at the onset, but the state of California used the Bay Area. I think the Bay Area has something like 25 active travel demand models that cover largely the same geography. And so oftentimes is the case is that each agency, whether it be a city or a COG or an MPO or whatever the case may be, maintains their own data, their own models, And there's a lot of reasons for that, but notably it has been historically very expensive to do really large scale kind of data modeling or travel modeling. And that leads to all kinds of inflexibility in a lot of ways where, you know, people move across jurisdictions, even though our travel models might only look at one jurisdiction. So at least from our perspective, there's an opportunity for data and software to serve as called a digital infrastructure that can be a bit of a common kind of language and common ground to make kind of large multi or mega region decisions from. So all that being said, there are three kind of product lines from the work we do. So the first is what we call Trends. Trends is think of it like a lightweight nationwide activity-based travel model. So we update the whole US every single day, and then we release new data on Thursday of every week. That's at the census tract level. So pretty high fidelity, but the value of that is you're looking at changes in mode or changes in trip purpose for the whole country every single week. The second product is what we call Places. So that's a full activity-based kind of mega region deployed travel model. We calibrate that just like you all might go through a typical calibration or validation process with your models. One big difference is we update that every single quarter. And so think of it like getting an entirely new, fully calibrated activity-based travel model every quarter for a given place. And then finally, we're just starting work on, should be ready hopefully the middle of this year, Scenario, which allows you to actually create forecast and run out future state scenarios. So what happens if we do new development? What happens if we extend a transit line? What happens if we build something new? I'm gonna give a couple of examples before I turn it back to Bill. So this is an example. This screen is just showing our Northern California mega region of our Places product. So because it's activity-based, it's fully disaggregate. And you can see individual trips, individual activities, individual people making those trips. You can see that we're using Northern California loosely. It's all of the north half of the state plus the entire state of Nevada. On the left side, you see a bunch of different filters, so all the various modes and all the various things that you can kind of look at. So just a top level example that you all can have access to in this free trial kind of California month. Here's the example of the Southern California. So it's the entire southern half of the state. In this particular screenshot, we've got the network links turned on, so you can just look at example of use of the network across all modes, across income types. On the left side, you see income bars kind of laid out over there. And I know there's been some discussion in the conference here, but active transportation analysis are really common use cases. So we're showing kind of the Stockton area here. And what we've done is we've filtered all of the data to just think of an example where might there be opportunities to move people to active modes. So in this particular case, the first step would be, let's go look at this particular area. Let's filter trips to just existing private auto trips that are under 1 mile. So these may be places where people are driving less than a mile, which is not insignificant for this part of the state. At least there's a lot of less than 1 mile trips. And then the question becomes, so what do you do about that? Is that an infrastructure problem? Is that an access problem? Is that a destination problem? But the ability to get at this level of detail, network level detail, and filter across things, and not just urban parts of the state, right? And parts of the state that traditionally haven't had access to this kind of data, I think is a really important part of the work. So that's one example. Second quick example, we do see a lot of equity analysis that's being done. So we're showing the LA kind of metro area here, but as an example, we filtered the data in this particular case to just home and work trips. In this case, just made by auto for incomes or household incomes less than $50,000 per year, and then for race and ethnicity that is non-white. So the example being able to look at origin destination pairs, use of the network, average trip distance to work. We've done a lot of this work with other agencies across the U.S., notably in Chicago. I just share this because it's always interesting. African American families, on average, have to travel almost 2x the number of miles to get to work every day, right? So that's a significant question about policy and framework and access that I think the data can largely kind of serve. Really quick example of our Trends product. So we're just showing Riverside County here. Trends is updated every single week, as I mentioned, across all different types. What we've got overlaid, which is a really cool use case, is the ability for you all to actually put in events. So these could be weather events, these could be stay-at-home events, these could be infrastructure events that then overlay on top of the graph. So the ability to look at before and after cause and effect is a common use case, but at very top level here, you see we provide things like trips, percentage of people shelter in place, the number of people traveling to work or school, COVID cases, VMT per person, across the entirety of the whole U.S. every single week. This is a more specific call out of Riverside County of the difference in modes week over week. So you look at just change over the last year in things like transit, walking, and biking. And of course, you know, everybody knows, but transit is way down in large part due to COVID. But you see actually a lot of that's had come back in terms of walking and biking trips. So this shift kind of back to transportation away from kind of historic modes. Then you see these two events kind of overlaid. The stay-at-home orders issued and restaurants reopened are an example of being able to get some context on top of the data. I'll quickly end with, and Bill kind of previewed this, but the relationship we've had with SACOG, Caltrans, and California Air Resources Board over the last couple of years. They went through a competitive process, selected Replica, in large part because of everything we've talked about: network level detail, privacy sensitive approach, kind of multimodal capacity, commercial freight capabilities, which we didn't spend a lot of time talking about today, but largely used. And then oftentimes, at least in SACOG's ability, they hadn't had the ability to really look at a lot of the pass-through trips. So outside of region travel, think like going up to Tahoe might be an example. So we allowed them to actually be able to capture some of that. One last specific use case, and I know it's really important to folks, and we've talked to a lot of actually probably folks on the phone about being able to do SB 743 implementation. We're doing a lot of this work now because we have network level detail and because we can actually account for outside of region VMT, not just kind of in region VMT. We work with a lot of partners to actually be able to do this really well. So I'll end with where we started with Bill. We're actually providing access to the platform at no cost for all public agencies in the state of California through the end of the month. So you've got about 8 days, 7 days left. You can take advantage of this. If you just go to replicahq.com/Cal, there'll be a sign up form. You don't have to talk to anybody. If you don't want to talk to anybody, you can just sign up. We've got all of the public agencies whitelisted. If you want to talk with our staff, you can as well. But hopefully this was helpful, and thanks for having us, Bill.
Thank you, and I really appreciate it. We don't unfortunately have time for questions, but that's why you have the webinar on Friday. And I know that I have a lot of our staff that are willing to, are interested in going. And just to bring it all back, because it all comes down to our trivia contest, we did throw a question up yesterday, which was, which community had the most walking trips by percentage? And